Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining this pre-application webinar hosted by the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission. I'm Jeff Brown, Executive Director here at the CRC. I'm joined by Wesley McWhite, our Director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and Chris Riggs, our Chief Counsel. Today, we're going to cover a number of topics, starting with overview of New Jersey's cannabis market. Next slide, please. Also going to talk about defining the new business license classes. We're very excited to open up for 3 new classes of license applications beginning on September 27th. Those are wholesale licenses, distribution licenses, and delivery service licenses. Talk through applying for a New Jersey cannabis business license and go over the application schedule. Before we get to that, though, we've made a number of important progresses in the last several years, and I'm going to turn it over to our Director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Wesley McWhite, to give a state of New Jersey's cannabis market.
Thank you again, Director Brown. As we prepare to accept applications for delivery, wholesale, and distribution, marking another milestone in New Jersey's cannabis industry, I wanted to share some exciting news about the state of New Jersey's cannabis market and progress we are making to ensure an equitable and diverse market. So a total number of 2,239 applications have been submitted to the CRC for licensure, with the majority of applications submitted by social equity and diversely owned businesses certified through the Department of Treasury. Out of those, over 1,500 applications have been approved. 167 of those applications are under review in the Office of Licensing. 324 applications are pending resubmission, and 140 applications are under review in the Office of Compliance and Investigations. And more than 1,800 cure letters have been sent out. As a part of our social equity framework here at New Jersey CRC, we do not deny applications because of a deficiency, but rather send cure letters to provide opportunity to resolve those deficiencies so that your application can continue its completeness review. So later on, we will discuss ways to avoid cure letters. So here at the New Jersey CRC, we are excited to see new businesses open, and local and small businesses are becoming licensed and are opening all across the state of New Jersey. More than 70 medicinal and recreational cannabis businesses are in operation today, and more than 45 dispensaries are open in 18 of 21 New Jersey counties. So far, the Commission has awarded 231 annual licenses, and those include straight to annual and annual to conversion licenses. So far, out of 231 licenses that have been awarded, 49 or 21% of our awarded licenses have gone to social equity businesses. Those folks that have passed cannabis convictions or marijuana convictions rather, or live in economically disadvantaged areas of our state. And 157 or about 68% of our annual licenses have been awarded to diversely owned businesses. And those include certified women, minority and disabled veteran owned businesses. And 14 licenses were designated as both social equity businesses and diversely owned businesses. So far, here are some key takeaways. Awards to social equity businesses and diversely owned businesses are outpacing submission rates. We also know that our priority review process is working. And social equity businesses make up 21% of all of our annual awards so far. But if you break that down even further, majority owners with past marijuana convictions make up about 16% of our social equity awards so far, which means those that have been most impacted by cannabis prohibition and the war on drugs are a part of our process and are a part of our application pool and are part of our awarded license holders. 17.7% and 17.7% of Black majority ownership and 21% of Asian majority ownership so far in our awarded applications are higher than our census ownership of all businesses in New Jersey. And we're also seeing that we're beating population percentages in Black and Asian majority business ownerships who have been awarded so far. As far as Latino and Hispanic ownership, it is consistent with census for all businesses, and we are looking to build on the great work that we are doing there as well. And with that, that is my last slide, and I turn it back over to Director Brown.
Thank you. So now we're going to cover the new license classes. So the statute and our regulations set up 6 classes of cannabis businesses as well as testing laboratories. Those are cultivators, manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, retailers, and delivery services. In the first year or so of recreational sales, the commission was focused on standing up and approving license applications for cultivators, manufacturers, and retailers. And now we turn to wholesalers, distributors, and delivery services. So I'm going to run through the requirements and what those licenses are authorized to do. So starting with wholesale licenses, they're Class 3 wholesalers. Wholesalers can purchase and store cannabis and cannabis products from cultivators, manufacturers, and other wholesalers. They can deliver flower and cannabis items or other products to cultivators, manufacturers, and other wholesalers. They cannot cultivate or package cannabis. They can't manufacture products, and they cannot distribute cannabis or cannabis products to retailers or consumers. Class 4 distributors can transport cannabis and cannabis products between businesses. Think of them as business-to-business transport of cannabis items and cannabis products. They can temporarily store cannabis and cannabis products, but they cannot cultivate or package cannabis, manufacture cannabis products, purchase and resell cannabis or cannabis products, and cannot sell cannabis or cannabis products directly to consumers. Delivery services, Class 6 delivery licenses, they will be the sort of the final stage of the supply chain, delivering from retailers to consumers. So they can purchase cannabis products, and cannabis paraphernalia from a retailer with an order from a consumer. They can then transport and deliver cannabis products, and cannabis paraphernalia to consumers who are of a legal age. That's 21 and over. They cannot cultivate, manufacture, or package cannabis or cannabis products. They cannot store cannabis or cannabis products, and they cannot sell cannabis or cannabis products to other cannabis businesses. I'd encourage everyone interested in these licenses to read the full regulations, that the full regulatory requirements, because they go over in detail exactly what you have to comply with to be awarded one of these licenses and issued one of these licenses. For example, in addition to what I covered here for Class 6s, they have to have strict age verification protocols in place so that when they're delivering to a consumer, they can be assured that person is 21 and over and therefore legally able to purchase and possess cannabis and cannabis items. Now we're going to shift to the application process. And for those of you who have tuned into our board meetings, you've heard me cover that application process and what that entails. And I'm going to start just covering the general process, and then we'll move into specifics for these new licenses and some tips and other information that can be helpful to potential applicants. So when we receive an application, they are assessed for priority. Applicants have different priority designations depending on what type of application they are. That's especially important here because of the dates on which we begin accepting applications for these new license classes. So applicants can qualify as a social equity business. That's a business that is either majority owned by somebody with a past marijuana conviction or convictions, or has lived in an economically disadvantaged area. They can qualify as diversely owned business. That's a business that is either certified minority owned, women owned, or disabled veteran owned. Or they can qualify as an impact zone business. That's a business that is either located in an impact zone, is owned by individuals from an impact zone, or pledges to employ a certain percentage of their workforce from impact zones. Depending on what they qualify for, that priority is then verified. And if an applicant hasn't submitted the right information in order for us to verify it, then they receive a cure letter and they have to resubmit. Once priority is verified, applications are then reviewed in accordance with that priority and the time they submit. Applications are assessed for completeness. So our team makes sure that everything that needs to be submitted is submitted. And if it is, they're deemed complete and they move on to scoring. Applicants then need to score sufficiently high in order to be moved forward and be recommended to the board for approval. We're going to cover the different paths to licensure, but applicants who are either converting a conditional license or going directly for an annual license, if they're complete, if their score sufficiently high, they then have to go through a qualification review that involves a criminal history background check. It also involves financial probity, essentially an investigation to verify the source of funds and the veracity of the application materials. So for this notice of application acceptance and these new application types, we will begin accepting on September 27th, 2023 at 9 a.m. Importantly, there will be an additional period of 90 days with which the CRC will only be accepting applications for these new classes from social equity businesses. Then 90 days after September 27th, on December 27th, 2023 at 9 a.m., we'll begin accepting Class 3 wholesaler, Class 4 distributor, and Class 6 delivery service applications from diversely owned businesses. And we'll continue to accept applications from social equity businesses. Then on March 27th, 2024, which is 6 months after these applications open, we'll start accepting applications from all applicants. So if you qualify as a social equity business, you can submit beginning on September 27th, 2023 at 9 a.m. If you qualify as a diversely owned business, you can submit beginning December 27th, 2023 at 9 a.m. And if you're qualify for either an impact zone or any other application type, then you can begin submitting for these applications beginning on March 27th, 2024. So Director McWhite mentioned that we've issued a number of cure letters and that we don't necessarily deny applications. We just reject them back to the applicant to cure deficiencies and then move them forward in the process. Some tips to help you avoid a cure letter: watch this webinar. We're going to post it on the website, nj.gov/cannabis, so that you can watch it over and over and over again if you need to. Definitely visit our website. There we have the key documents that you need and the key information you need to move through this process. The notice of application acceptance is probably most important to the licensure process. That explains what you need in your application. It explains what is scored and how many points you need to move forward. It explains essentially the application process itself in more detail. So use that as your guide throughout this process. There are also FAQs and additional guides that help you complete your application. We've been accepting applications for a while now. We've received over 2,200 of them. We're aware of some of the common pitfalls and that applicants face, and we have guides on our website to help them overcome them. And then there's other helpful information. You can make a list with that notice of application acceptance of all the required documents and check and double check that you've submitted everything that you need to. One of the guides that we have on the website is essentially pertains to social equity businesses, and that's explains how to fill out and submit a social equity attestation and what sort of documentation you need in order to be verified as a social equity business. So looking at those documents that are required, what do we require? We require an entity disclosure form. That's a form for every cannabis business entity or related entity, i.e. financial sources, management services contractor, that gives us key information about your business, the people that are involved, other key facts. We collect personal history disclosures on persons of interest. Those are key individuals to the operations or financing of the cannabis business. Tax returns, government ID, business registration documents, up-to-date diversely owned business certifications. Those are certifications from the Department of Treasury, Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services that we require for diversely owned businesses. Financial and management services agreements. If you have a financial source agreement or MSA, we require those to be submitted with the application. Chief Counsel Riggs will talk more about that later. And then we require the submission of a number of standard operating procedures that are compliant with our regulations. Additionally, municipal and zoning approval for your site, and other documents. It's important, particularly as there are consultants, attorneys, et cetera, that are operating in the space, helping multiple applicants, double check your documents, make sure that you're submitting the right documents for the right applicants, make sure that everything matches when you submit your application. So you'll also want to review, in addition to that notice of application acceptance, the CREAM Act itself. That's the statute that underpins this endeavor, as well as the personal use cannabis rules. Those are both available on our website. You can review them. The notice of application acceptance, a guide to how to avoid a cure letter. We have instructions for the application platform itself. That's essentially our licensing platform. And I would encourage applicants to go in now, create an account. You can start getting your application ready for submission. If you're not familiar with the license portal yet, you can go in there now, create an account, and start getting ready to submit. However, if we receive an application for these license classes before the date or time on which we're opening up for receiving those applications, it will be rejected back to be resubmitted. But you can get in there, you can start using the system, and you can start getting ready to submit. Check out that social equity attestation and instructions, and then check out all the other useful information. You can use the QR code here, or it's nj.gov/cannabis. So when we look at the different types of licenses, it's important to understand a couple of things. Number one, what the business is going to be doing. Number two, the size of the business. And then number three, what type of application you should submit. And next slide, we're going to cover conditional and annual, but for here, there are the 6 license classes and then testing laboratories, and that is essentially the activities that you can undertake under those licenses. Now that there was a ban on what's called vertical integration, that's holding different combinations of licenses, that has now expired, so that businesses can now go after multiple licenses depending on what scope of operations they seek to engage in, and then in a lot of cases hold multiple licenses depending on what they intend to do. When we talk about size, there's 2 sizes of businesses: standard and then micro business. Micro businesses are sort of confined to either specific square footage, limits on the numbers of employees, or limits on volume. And I encourage everybody who wants to pursue a micro business to review those regulations. All micro businesses have to have less than 10 employees, with certain caveats which you can find in our regulations. When we talk about what type of application to submit, there's really 2 routes to go, and that's conditional or annual. I would say, if you have site control, if you have municipal approval, you can go right to annual if you want. If you don't have those things and you want to go through the conditional route, you can apply for a conditional license first before you apply to convert that to an annual license. And those 2 paths are as such. So if you apply for a conditional, conditionals are prioritized over annuals in the licensure process. Although we did make an amendment to the previous notice of application to move annual licenses overall up in the application process, but conditionals and conditional conversions are still prioritized over annuals. A conditional license, as they apply to conversion, can add new owners, can add financial sources. The core ownership of the business has to stay the same, but they do have flexibility to add new financial sources and add new owners, provided it doesn't alter that core ownership, doesn't change their priority status, whether they're a diversely owned business or a social equity business, and doesn't take them out of out of compliance with the overall conditional requirements. Conditional license applicants don't need site control or municipal approval. So if you're working through that process and you want to get your application process started, you can apply for conditional and then come in and apply for a conversion once you've received municipal approval and you've gained site control. An annual application doesn't have the same priority in the application process, although I did mention that we did move those up overall. So they do get prioritized a bit more than they did when we first started taking applications. There can't be new owners or financial sources in the application process. Once you submit that application, that needs to stay static until it's approved. And then it does require site control and municipal approval. So the law requires that if you go for an annual license, you need to have your site under control and you need to have municipal approval in place when you apply. So before you submit that application, there's several things that businesses should do. Number one, decide on a legal business structure. Our regulations are pretty permissive here. It's up to the applicant to determine what is most applicable or best suited for their business. You have to get federal and state tax ID numbers. These are required for federal taxes, required if you want to hire employees, open bank accounts, and apply for licenses and permits. And you need both the federal and state tax IDs. So you want to choose and register your business and business name. I would like to point everybody to one of our regulations, which doesn't allow for doing business as or DBAs. So the cannabis business has to be named by its registered business name. So if you were planning on operating under a DBA, just make sure you register your business and business name accordingly, because you will be required by the regs to operate under that business name. You can apply for a name change, but I would recommend just trying to figure that out from the outset. Additionally, a cannabis business can't use, display, advertise under any alternate name. They have to go under that legal business registration. So you want to open a bank account. There are, in fact, banks in New Jersey that accept cannabis business clients. I know that access to capital, access to banking is a problem across this industry, across the country, but there are banks in New Jersey that do business with cannabis business clients. That'll help you stay legally compliant and protected. And some documents that you would need to do that: personal ID, EIN, social security card, business formation papers, ownership agreements, business registration, a lot of the same stuff that you need to apply for a license via our process. So if you intend to qualify as a diversely owned business, you'll want to apply for a certification as a minority-owned, woman-owned, or disabled veteran-owned business via the New Jersey Department of the Treasury Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services website. Their process takes some time, although they do move pretty fast, but you'll just want to make sure that you have those certifications lined up for when you come and apply in our process, because if you don't have that certification, then the application will be rejected if you're applying as a diversely owned business, and you'll have to get that in order to reapply. So for that certification, or for general certification eligibility standards, you need that EIN. You need to complete documents on the following web pages here, and depending on the type of business, there's different steps you may need to take to go through that certification process. I would encourage you to look at that early, make sure you're complying with the Department of Treasury Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services process, because as I said, you need that certification in hand when you come to the CRC to apply for a license as a diversely owned business. One thing I'll note that we see happening in the applications process is that businesses can fall out of good standing or lose their certification status depending on when they originally certify. So even though a certification is for 3 years, there are filing requirements the businesses have to do every year. You want to make sure you stay compliant with those. And there's tools to be able to check your status online. But we do see a fair amount of applicants who have their certification lapse because they don't meet or don't comply with various filing requirements. And then we have to issue a cure while they go and get recertified and get back into compliance. So as I said, you want to maintain that certification. There's an annual verification. You have to certify, recertify, make sure you hit that 1 year mark. And on the renewal, there's a verification statement to attest to any changes to ownership or revenue eligibility. Diversely owned businesses have to maintain their status with the CRC for a minimum of 2 years post licensure. So you'll need to even when you make it through the certification process, you will need to maintain eligibility as a diversely owned business in order as a condition of licensure. So for applicants who want to qualify as an impact zone, you'll need to submit proof that you qualify as an impact zone business. This could include residency, tax returns. In some cases, you can submit documents related to other things. For social equity businesses, past cannabis convictions are evidence of that is one way to get qualification as a social equity business. As I said, social equity, you're either majority owned by people with past cannabis convictions or from an economically disadvantaged area, and impact zone businesses can qualify one of 3 ways, either via residency, location in an impact zone, or hiring from impact zones. I mentioned before that we require entity disclosure forms and personal history disclosure forms of applicants. There will be an update to those forms. They will be posted on our website prior to September 27th. I will note that older versions of the forms will be accepted, but applicants may be asked to supplement the information if they use an older version of the form. Keep checking our website. Those should be posted hopefully by the end of next week. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chief Counsel Riggs to talk through requirements related to management services agreements and financial source agreements.
Thank you, Director Brown. Obviously not as exciting as the new license classes, but just as important. These are agreements that help cannabis businesses operate their businesses. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, be careful what you sign. There are regulatory requirements for both management services agreements and financial source agreements. A management services agreement is essentially a contract with a management services contractor and a cannabis business for the management services contractor to help operate the business, to staff the business, to run the management of the business. One of the important things is that these folks that are management services contractors can be paid fees, they can be compensated, but there can be no ownership interest given to a management services contractor. Another thing to keep in mind is that a management services contractor can only have up to 5 contracts with a cannabis business, and we keep track of that. So, we're looking at that and confirming with every application that, they have only up to 5 agreements with cannabis businesses. And finally, cannabis businesses and owners of those businesses cannot also be a management services contractor. Next slide, please. So some of the things that you can see in these management services agreements, like I said, these are agreements where there's a company that comes in to help you run your cannabis business, right? They manage, they supervise, they hire the employees, they help with the operations, they provide the technical assistance, and they help with the day-to-day operations. They help bring in the cannabis products and work with the wholesale agreements and things like that. Next slide, please. Again, be careful what you sign, especially for financial source agreements. We review all of these. We make sure that they're regulatory compliant. We want to avoid cure letters. A financial source agreement is essentially a lender lending money to the cannabis business, capital, for that business to use for their business operations. Similar to the management services agreements, there's a limit on how many cannabis businesses you can have a contract with. So a financial source can have no more than 7 agreements with a cannabis business. And some examples here, a line of credit, loans, bonds, some notes. These are the types of things that cannabis businesses have presented to us as financial source agreements. Next slide. Both management services agreements and financial source agreements cannot impose unreasonable fees or interest rates. So financial source agreement can only have up to a 20% interest rate for the business. They can't receive an ownership interest in exchange of the cannabis business. So they can't own the business. They can't have any ownership with the business that they have the contract with. The business owner has to maintain control of the business, and there can't be an unfair advantage in the contract for the financial source or the management services contractor. They cannot have a percentage of business profits that are greater than the net profits received by the cannabis business, and they cannot prohibit the cannabis business from selling or buying from any other company or cannabis business. Next slide. Some more things here that the management services agreements and financial source agreements cannot have in them as part of the provisions in the agreement. They cannot require the cannabis business to enter into non-compete agreements with other cannabis businesses. They cannot require the cannabis business to enter into non-compete agreements. We had that twice there because that's important. We don't want non-compete agreements to be entered into by these financial sources or management services. You can't have the power to overrule the fundamental business operations and decisions. The owners of the business have to stay involved. They're the ones that are responsible for the business decisions made by the cannabis business. For management services agreements, they can only last 5 years. After 5 years, there has to be an opportunity for that to be renegotiated. That contract needs to be renegotiated between the management services contractor and the cannabis business. Financial source agreements cannot impose, we see this a lot actually, cannot impose prepayment penalties for paying off the debt. There cannot be a penalty and the interest rate goes up or down, there can't be any penalty for paying off that debt early. The cannabis business has to have the ability to pay off that debt without having a penalty. Next slide, please. So before you sign a management services agreement, make sure you're reading the regulations. The regulations spell out the types of things that need to be in there. Check the document for the prohibited terms and conditions that we just went over and cross-reference it with the regulations so that you can ensure that you're not getting a cure letter and that your application is moving forward in the process. You send a copy of any proposed agreement. Even if it's not executed, send it to your investigator so that we can look at it and take a look and see if we flag any prohibited terms or conditions. Make sure that you're submitting all the required documentations for a management services contractor. That includes an entity disclosure form, a background check, personnel information, and things like that. Make sure you're clearly communicating with that management services contractor of your plans or expectations to audit their records. So if they're running your business and you're the cannabis business, you need to maintain control of those business operations. You need to be able to audit the documents and be able to have access to all of those records. Next slide, please. And before you sign a financial source agreement, again, go over the regulations for financial source agreements. Check the document for prohibited terms or conditions and cross-reference it with those regulations. Make sure you're sending a copy of that proposed agreement to your assigned investigator so that we can look at the interest rates and we can look at all the provisions to make sure there's no prepayment penalty. And the reason that you're sending in the proposed agreements, again, is to avoid that cure letter. You don't want to get a cure letter. You want to make sure the agreement is regulatory compliant. And lastly, submit all the required financial source documentations that are required by the rules. Again, you need an entity disclosure form, maybe a personal history disclosure form if it's an individual that's lending you the capital, and any other information. And one final note, if there are changes to financial source agreements or management services agreements, make sure those material changes are reported immediately to your assigned investigator or compliance officer. The changes need to be approved and vetted under our regulations. So submit those changes so that we can take a look at them. And that is back to you, Director Brown.
Thank you, Chris. Just a note, we have opened up the Q&A function. And so a couple different things here. You can either submit questions into the Q&A here. We're also going to take questions via the email on the screen here, crc.licensing@crc.nj.gov. following receipt of questions, we're going to go through and we're going to post on our website responses to the most frequently asked questions. So you can anticipate before September 27th, a new post from the CRC responding to the most frequently received questions related to this application process. I want to also pause and talk a little bit about expectations. And specifically review expectations. So, review timelines are largely going to be dependent on the volume of applications received. I can tell everybody in attendance here that we are in a better place from a staffing perspective than we were when we first started, when we were, about 7 months old, when we started accepting applications, the previous round, particularly for cultivation. So processing times right now for applications that are ready, i.e. meet all the requirements, don't need any more cure letters, from the point they are, submitted in a complete form. For conditionals, we're currently under 90 days to get those recommended to the board. And then for annuals and conversions, I'd say about 6 months. Because it has to go through both a licensing review for completeness and scoring, and then it has to go to investigations for the criminal history background check, as well as financial probity review. Now, we'll try to be transparent with applicants about review times. I can also tell you that we're going to be posting some new resources on the website to help applicants understand where they are in the review process. So look for those coming in the next several weeks here. Outside of, so for questions related to this webinar or the notice of application acceptance, you can throw them in the chat. You can send them to that email. We will go through them, and we will then post a post with all the frequent answers to frequently asked questions. The recording of this webinar will be available on our website, so you can go back and look at those. And then, as I said, those FAQs will be posted. So some resources you can check out, particularly for those who are trying to navigate through the process of starting their business. Highly encourage you to go to the Business Action Center. They have a business navigator, actually. You can go use the navigator function to select cannabis business, and it will walk you through some of the key pieces of the process that you need to do even before coming to the CRC to apply. Some of the things we covered on the webinar today, some other things, they'll link you to that business registration function at the Department of Treasury. They'll link you to how to get certified as a diversely owned business, and some other things. Additionally, Chamber of Commerce, local Chamber of Commerce, state Chamber of Commerce, those are good for general business supports. I also encourage, I want to go back to what I said earlier. Spend some time going through all the resources on our website. Review the notice of application acceptance several times over, because that is your guide to how to submit a complete application, how to be deemed complete, how to be scored sufficiently high to be moved forward in the process, and what to expect. Read those regulations, because whether it's writing SOPs that are part of the application, or working with our compliance team to get your business up and running, you need to know the regulations that underpin this industry and what you're required to do. Read the guides on our website. Our communications team, our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, they've spent a lot of time trying to put together guides and materials to help applicants move through this process efficiently and in a timely manner. And we get a lot of questions. A lot of times they're already answered on a guide or an FAQ on our website. So please spend some time going through our website even before you apply. As I also mentioned, the portal is open now. It's been open. So, if you're looking at one of these licenses, you can go in, you can start getting your submission ready even before we open for applications. You can make sure you're familiar with the portal itself. And, once that submission date arrives, then you can submit all your materials. To review those submission dates, September 27th is for social equity businesses only. That's for all three classes, for wholesalers, distributors, and delivery services. Social equity business applicants can submit starting on September 27th. Diversely owned businesses can submit beginning on December 27th, and then all other applicants can start submitting on March 27th of next year. So We have a question. Does woman-owned qualify to apply for a delivery license? Yes, beginning on December 27th. Certified woman-owned business is a diversely owned business, and they can begin applying on December 27th. So another question, do we hold office hours where someone can come into your office and ask some questions? We don't, however, use these resources on our website. You can reach out to licensing. You can call the number on the previous slide. We can go back one slide if possible, which will show you the number to reach somebody in licensing who can help answer your question. So question, can I apply to the new license classes if I already have a cultivation licenses? Yes, you can apply for another licenses. Cultivators can also hold a license for manufacturing, retail, and delivery. So another question, how soon can I expect to receive an investigator? So once you pass through licensing, that's your application is deemed complete and it's scored sufficiently high, then you'll be assigned to investigations. The only applications that are assigned to investigations are conversions to annual and annual applications. So conditionals, once they are deemed complete, once they score sufficiently high, there's an initial review for any, financial source agreements or management services agreements, but otherwise they're recommended for approval if they meet all the requirements. But for annuals and conversions, they will move to investigations. Once that happens, you'll be assigned an investigator and they'll reach out and introduce themselves. If you are not using a bank, do you need financial disclosure form? Yes, we need financial disclosure forms for all financial sources. So those are, any person or entity that lends any amount of capital to a cannabis business or applicant or license holder. So you have to fill out those documents for any financial source. If a cannabis arrest resulted in a conditional discharge, does that still qualify as a cannabis conviction when applying for a social equity license? If it's not on your record, it would not qualify. However, I'll note that if there was a conviction that was expunged because of the law that was passed, that may still qualify for as a social equity business. For delivery businesses, will each delivery driver need a cannabis business license? The businesses itself is licensed, so the entity will need to receive a delivery service license. The individual drivers will not. However, they will need driver's licenses. That is a requirement. But it's the entity itself that will need the delivery service license. Employees will, however, need cannabis business identification cards. So once you receive a license, they will need to undergo a criminal history background check, meet those requirements, and will be issued a cannabis business ID card. So what is the cost of a delivery license? The entire fee schedule is available on our website. You can find it there. It's dependent on whether you're a micro business or a standard business. Question, when can an existing license holder apply for an additional cultivation manufacturing retail license? You can do that now. So the ban on vertical integration between retail, manufacturing, cultivation, that expired in February of this year. And so if you want to seek a vertically integrated license with cultivation, manufacturing, and retail, you can do that right now. Will there be any restrictions for the use of customized autonomous vehicles for the purpose of delivery services? Autonomous vehicles cannot be used for delivery at this time. And last but not least, will this recording be posted on the website? Yes, it will, as well as additional answers to frequently asked questions. So I'm going to stop there, and I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you for being here to take in this information. We're very excited to open up applications for these new license classes and really continue to push New Jersey's cannabis market forward. As Director McWhite noted, we've really put our foot forward when it comes to diversity and equity in this market, and that's only going to continue with these new license classes, which is why we're staggering acceptance with social equity first, then diversely owned businesses, and then all other businesses. But everybody who wants to apply will ultimately get an ability to compete in this market. So thank you from all of us here at the CRC. We hope this was informative, and please, please, please visit our website for more resources. Thank you.